Hello, hello, hello again, everyone. Well, we are up to lucky number 4, episode number 4 of our 1/16th scale FT17. Well, of course, in the last episode, we made clean parts dirty, especially concentrating on the lower areas, the running gear, and things like that. Well, this episode, we're going to kind of continue this process. We're going to move up on the vehicle somewhat and start completing some of these other sections. And when I say sections, well, I mean sections because this is such a big vehicle, actually, a big model on my bench. It just takes a while to get through it all. But don't worry, we'll get there, and in the end, we'll have a finished piece. Those of you with a keen eye would have already noticed that the tracks were installed on those running gear parts in the last episode. But so that means we need to back up a little bit and let's see how those tracks were actually produced. Well, they're pretty cool. They are workable as long as you're just careful with the glue, and they work just exactly like the real tracks would with little pins and links. So just be careful with the glue, and you'll have a working set of tracks. And really, it doesn't take very long to get into a nice rhythm here, and these go together very, very quickly. And once we have the proper length of links, say that 3 times quickly, then it's just a matter of adding onto the track pads themselves, the shoes, and again, just little bit of care with the glue, and it almost just clicks into place. And then, like I said, once we get finished here, we'll have a full length of tracks, totally workable. We'll attach those pins once we have it installed onto the vehicle. But first, we need to do some painting. In terms of the base colors, well, first off, a Mr. Surfacer 1200 primer layer, just lightly applied overall, and then I came back in with AK Gen 3 lead gray. Okay, now we're ready to start weathering, and this becomes that tricky, dangerous thing. We do a little experimenting here. So if you remember in the last episode, I spent a little bit of time trying to match up oil colors with the pigment colors. I'm going to do the same thing here, matching up the pigments with acrylic colors. My idea here is I'm going to make a solution, a wash, if you will, with the acrylic colors, and then I want to add pigment into that solution. So then as I apply it over these surfaces, I'll end up with color and texture at the same time, and I'll be able to do that in broad strokes. I can always refine the process later down the road a little bit, but something of this size, I kind of need to get through the process a little quicker than just individually painting every track link. Okay, let's go ahead and give this a go. So first thing we want to do is just make up a nice wash, an acrylic wash. So we'll add some water to this cup here, this lid, and we'll add some color, one of the colors that matches the pigment, and get this to a consistency, like I said, just a light wash, so there's not a lot of color here necessarily. Next up, we'll add the pigment to the mixture. This, again, is the same matching color, so our light earth gets mixed in with the lighter color acrylics, and then we'll give that a good stir and mix everything together. Now, this is really the tricky, dangerous part. When we work with acrylic paints, especially when you do something like this, a wash of acrylics, there's always that possibility that we're going to end up with some tide marks, those unsightly drying stains. And I want to avoid that at all costs. You could add a few drops of dish soap into this mixture. That helps prevent that from happening. I've learned that if I can come back quick enough with basically a clean brush and just kind of wipe it back, I can take care of all those different tide marks before they have a chance to develop. You do have to work quickly. You have to be pretty mindful. You can't let things dry. You can see areas here where I need to probably address it fairly quickly because they're starting to dry. You can see it's starting to get some areas where there'll be rings, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So the real trick here is to give it enough time so that it dries a little bit, so that it deposits color onto the surface. But we don't want it to dry so much that we get those tide marks, those rings, and we can't get rid of them. So this is where the tricky and especially the dangerous part comes in. You have to have that timing just about right. And then with that same mixture, I want to make sure that those colors are transferred to other areas of the model as well. So again, we worked on the lower hull last time, the running gear, and I'll add a few stains here and there using those same colors, which are very consistent with what we've already done. So they won't stand out, but we're just kind of making sure everything is, what's the word I want? Harmonious. There's another big word for you. This is that time where I get to say thank you once again to my Patreon. Thanks, guys. If you like this channel and would like to support it further, please check out the Patreon page. The link for that is in the description below. In return, early viewing of these videos, special videos only for my Patreons, work in progress, photographs. We have a Discord server for chat. I hope you check it out. Now, we've been spending a ton of time on that running gear and even the tracks. So now it's time to start moving our way around the model itself and the upper hull. You recall from the last episode, I had my palettes out and had all sorts of colors on it, the greens and the reds and the blues, and of course all the dirt and dust tones as well. Well, we worked with a lot of dirt and dust tones. Now we're going to start working with some of those other colors. So on these upper areas, one of the first things I want to try to do is just enrich or add visual interest to a lot of these different large areas of camouflage using the greens, the yellows, the brown tones. And this is kind of a pre-weathering, if you will, because a lot of these variations of colors will, in the end, start to look like stains or scuffs and things like that. So this is actually a fairly important part, even though it's very, very subtle at this stage. It does play a role in the final presentation. And just because we're working with those pretty colors doesn't mean we're not going to get this thing dirty once again or still, or because we need to be consistent. This is that area that's going to be behind the running gear, behind the tracks and the wheels and such, that's going to be visible from the outside because there is that big gap. So we need to establish all those same dirt and dust tones using the exact same colors as we did in the previous episode. Now, like I said, this is going to be one of those heavily weathered areas, but heavily weathered doesn't necessarily mean messy weathered, if that makes sense. So even though I'm adding quite a bit of weathering, so a lot of earth tones and dust tones and things like that, I do want them to have purpose. I want each of these stains to have a sense of purpose. I want the weathering to tell a story. I want even the direction of the splatters to make sense in the movement of the vehicle. So as I move through this, even though, like I said, it's a heavily weathered area, I do want to continue to tell that same story. I'm waiting for paint to dry, so let's do something else. So let's work on the Pioneer tools. There's a few of them here. Got a shovel, a pick, and a sledgehammer. Nothing special fancy about these at all. Just paint them out, and then we'll attach them to the vehicle. And let's take an opportunity to add just a little detail. This is just Tamiya tape, cut thin, painted in a kind of a leather color, and these will become straps to help hold those tools in place. Okay, let's do something a little bit different here. This is the top of the vehicle, so this is basically near the engine deck. This happens to be the fuel intake area that I'm working on right now. But before I've started this, you might be able to see this. I hope you can see this on video. I've already come through with the yellows, the greens, and the reds, and I've worked those into the camouflage pattern. So there's already a start to the weathering here where the colors, I've added a little bit of fading here and there, some shadowing here and there. And now I can come back in over the top of that again and start adding and enhancing those effects using some of the environmental colors, the grease, the dirts, adding more yellows here and there, ochres, darker greens, things like that. then when I'm working with oils, my process is almost always the same. So I'll add some color. I'll take a soft brush, blend it back a little bit, come back in with some more color, work that new color into the surface with the soft brush, just a back and forth. And depending on how much working you do with the color and the soft brush, you can have very nice soft effects, or you can have some more harsh weathering type effects. Each section almost becomes like its own little model. For instance, this is an engine hatch. At this scale, at 1/16th, you can spend quite a bit of time and really work in the nuances here. And that's what I'm finding on this model. And that's why this is taking, quite a few episodes to get through, because there's just a lot of space to cover. And so with that said, let's just let this roll and you can watch the process. Jumping back in, well, now that engine hatch we just worked on, you can see that's in place now over the engine. And this little latch that I'm working on at the moment, that happens to be the opening for the radiator right underneath it where they would add the water. Harkening back to the very first episode, you recall that when I did the base painting, I added layers of hairspray in the thought that I would do some chipping using hairspray. That didn't work out so well. Go back and take a look at those first episodes if you want to see why. So now I'm going to add a few scuffs and chips and things, abrasions as we will, just the old-fashioned way, just with the fine brush and acrylic paints. This This has been one of those episodes where we did a lot of, what would you call it? Manual labor, let's put it that way. So a lot of not sexy stuff. So we did the tracks, we did some heavier weathering on the hull, but we did do some things on the upper hull which I think are kind of fun. In the next episodes, of course, we'll continue weathering with the model. We're on the upper hull now, so things must be getting close to getting finished. As always, if you do like this channel, hit that like and subscribe. And of course, I do have a Patreon. I'd like to see you over there as well. Until the next time, guys, take care and happy modeling.